There's a lot of pressure on the IC sometimes in demands and figuring out something that may not necessarily exist yet. So it's giving them the air cover where they don't have to worry about any sort of repercussions if something bad happened.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. I am so excited you are here with me today because I know we are about to have an amazing conversation with our guest today, Yaron Alfi. Yaron is the co-founder and CEO of Magenta, a company started with the simple belief that busy work should never get in the way of innovation. Yaron started his career as a quality engineer at Parker Aerospace, and in 2013, he left Parker to join SpaceX to become what is now called a build reliability engineer. From 2013 to 2015, he was working the night shift, supporting the production of just about every SpaceX component, from Falcon to Dragon, avionics to composites and propulsion. This experience gave him a great view of the entire manufacturing system, which is why he transitioned into the role of lead product manager for manufacturing systems. This is when I got to meet Yaron while he was helping to build some of the key components of what those in the industry know as Warp Drive, the internally built software system that SpaceX uses to control just about all aspects of their internal operations, but especially manufacturing. In 2021, Yaron left SpaceX to join ABL Space Systems, where he set out to do the same thing he did at SpaceX, just do it better and faster. Build software that could help the company be more productive. And despite some amazing efforts at ABL, they ran into some struggles and laid off most of their staff in 2024, which meant Yaron had to decide what to do next. At the beginning of 2025, Magenta is what he landed on. He and his co-founders are working from the ground up to build AI systems for manufacturing workflows, with the goal of allowing American manufacturing to scale faster and not be limited by traditional software solutions. In today's discussion, we're going to get Yaron's take on why software seems to be such a limiting factor for manufacturing, what leadership lessons he took from SpaceX, how he went about building his own team at ABL, and of course, as a product manager, we're going to make sure to talk about informal leadership roles and how to be effective without an explicit authority. Before we get into the discussion, if this sounds like an exciting conversation and you're not already subscribed to the show, please make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future episode. And if there's somebody in your life who you think should listen to this conversation, I would humbly appreciate it if you would share this show with them, because that is how we grow. So with that, let's get into the discussion. Yaron, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me. Really excited about this.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you, especially like I mentioned, to get your take on this, because I got to say, it's funny when I talk to people who are outside the industry or people who haven't spent a lot of time in aerospace in particular, they're always surprised at how many hardware manufacturing companies spend a ton of resources building software. We mentioned Warp Drive. You were obviously doing this at ABL. Stoke Space has built their own system. Like, so many of these companies have to build it themselves. And so I have to start with the question of why? Like, why is it that software ends up being such a limiting factor for manufacturing?
I think that's a great question. When you look at a lot of the legacy pieces of software that are out there, a lot of them have a bajillion customers, and over time just continue to expand their product line to support all of those. And in doing that, they continue to bolt on features and functionality, and it becomes harder and harder over time, especially when you have all those people using it, to effectively make rapid change and keep up with the times. So generally, when you look at legacy software, and so like your big box solutions, generally the things that people find problematic with it are the UX, potentially it's slow, and I think ultimately how well it actually supports your processes. And I would say processes and workflows, to me, when it comes to manufacturing software, are the most important thing.
Yeah.
And a big reason why companies have decided to go through and build software is the only way to actually ensure, at least that was the thought, the only way to actually ensure that it meets your process and needs is to have full control over it. I think a lot of that's shifting now.
Yeah, I'm really interested because I see the exact same thing in, the HR space as well. It's the same kind of thing with manufacturing as you have all these really big players that have really big systems. And, I remember I was being really surprised. Like one of the biggest players in HRIS is a company called Workday. And, tons of enterprise companies, Fortune 500 companies use them. And I remember at a company I was working at previously, we were implementing Workday. And I was really surprised that there was no guidance on like, this is how you should use Workday, right? This is the best way to get things done. They were simply making a system that could be used however you wanted to use it. And so that then meant, one, we had to figure out how we wanted to use it, but two, that, as you said, like it just ultimately means that, yeah, the system has a bajillion different things that you can change or you can tweak. And this is what ultimately led my decision when I started talking to a lot of learning management system providers specifically. Whenever I would ask them, can your system do this? If they said, we can build that for you, I was out. I was like, no, because that means no, because you don't have like a thesis for what a good learning management system is. You're just building whatever software features people want. So it sounds like that's kind of part of the heart of this problem of what makes it so difficult.
And I think you bring up a good point there. And one thing is when a software company says we could build that for you versus the person that you're talking to on the other end having a deep understanding of the problem that you talked about.
Yes.
Because there's plenty of times that I look in the past where there are features or functionalities in the system that didn't exist, but I knew absolutely well that like it was going to be no problem for my team to build it. And I think that's the struggle that I see is it's a lot of these solutions don't necessarily have a deep understanding of their customers' problems.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And it's to bring this to what you're working on right now with Magenta. There's actually quite a few companies out there right now that are trying to like, I guess like make the next generation of ERP, but you're doing something a little bit different at Magenta. Is that right?
Yep. A big thing that we noticed as we scanned the market, there's a lot of companies that already have software stacks set up and there's software that they like, there's software that they don't like, whatever that might be. What we're noticing is that a lot of companies, regardless, have multiple pieces of software, which means data exists in multiple locations. And really what we have become as like engineers and workers, employees, is taking information from one system, assessing it, taking information from another system, assessing it, compiling that, like looking for differences, all the tasks that you do with data, synthesizing it, and then taking action on it. As AI has started to develop and become what it is today with the foundation models or LLMs, there's a lot of stuff that you mix this new technology that unlocks a ton of functionality that's possible now with deep understanding of these workflows and the pain that some of these manufacturers have to go through with navigating these different pieces of software. That gives us the ability to build AI agents that understand workflows that are nimble enough to deal with like minor variation and in some cases pretty drastic variation.
Yeah.
And ultimately help and assist engineers, like you said before, to focus on innovating versus busy work.
Well, because the experience that I've seen with this kind of thing was pre the AI revolution, and it was a friend of mine actually started a company on the HRIS side because he saw the same thing and building direct integrations. I think that's the traditional way to handle the fact that you have data in one system, data in another system, and you kind of purpose built pipelines between those two systems. I'm assuming the hope, the expectation is that AI does that, but it doesn't have to be purpose built. It's much more just you just release it on the system. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so a big part of Magenta are connectors, like being able to connect into systems. But even if there isn't a connector built yet, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people in manufacturing are still using Excel spreadsheets to do stuff. It may not be, they're not managing their ERP, some are, um, but the fact that you could even deal with unstructured data that's not necessarily in a system is also pretty huge.
Sure.
Um,
Got it.
so there's companies that we're talking to that are able to see value out of what we're building that don't even necessarily have robust systems set up. And then
Yeah.
there's companies that do. And so basically it's building a tool that helps assist in doing tasks that traditionally it was a person had to do by just brute force.
Got it.
Um, and so some workflows lend themselves better to others in that regards.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that this is kind of the future of AI because I feel like so many fields. I see it in learning, you see it in manufacturing, you hear about it all the time in medicine, like doctors spend something like 70% of their time just like inputting data and stuff. And
Yeah.
I mean, if we've built up all this technology, but just like the interface, the human to technology interface is still so slow that it's taking all of our time just doing these little busy, as you said, like the busy work. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully if we get rid of that, it just allows us to spend more time doing what we meant to do anyway, whether it's designing stuff, being a doctor, yeah.
My co-founders and I spent a bit of time just even understanding how AI affects us in the software world before we even started applying it to manufacturing. And the goal there was like, how do we become 4 or 5x more productive than we currently are? And there's a lot of interesting ways, and I'll probably share this in a series of posts
Yeah.
about how I use AI in my daily life and how it's changed the way that I work and how I use it as a tool. But a lot of that magic that the software industry has with AI, it's like figuring out how to bring some of that magic into manufacturing and hard tech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With that was, thank you for letting us go down that dive there.
Yeah.
I want to shift into more of kind of the management leadership aspect. And if we could just kind of start at the beginning, your first formal leadership role was at SpaceX, which is a crucible in a lot of ways for a lot of people. What are some of the things you learned about leadership in a place like SpaceX?
Yeah, there's an element of SpaceX that was like, controlled chaos. There was just a lot going on. When you talk about prioritization, just team sizes, like the just like the criticality of stuff. There's a lot to be aside from like when you go into management, just as an individual in a company like that. There's just like a lot to balance, which was cool. You have a lot of people, and you're seeing this with all the folks at SpaceX that have started their own companies, and there's this like diaspora
Yes.
of SpaceXers that are just building the new wave of technology in LA and other parts of the country. And it's just like the lessons that it teaches you. It's like you can't spend way too much time on a project because there's too much stuff to do. But
Mm-hmm.
you also can't necessarily do a poor job on that project because no one's going to trust you to do another project. And and then you're also surrounded by a lot of young, hungry like folks that are willing to work literally every hour, every minute of the day. And even though I wouldn't say that it was negatively competitive, but there was always someone and like lots of people working much harder than you.
Yeah.
And that was like very inspiring, and it just made people want to do more and get more done and innovate.
There's two pieces of that I'd love to dive into. And the first one is that idea of constant change, because I was asked to do a talk on this about a month ago. In a couple of weeks, I'm doing another one, and it's specifically about the topic of leading in times of change and managing in times of change. Because I think historically, At a lot of organizations, we're just used to a slower pace of things. And a big part of your role as a manager is to kind of keep some continuity, make people feel comfortable, make sure you absorb the change of the information coming in and pass it to your folks. And I think now the rest of the world, whether it's because of AI, because of the economy, because of just technology in general, they're getting a little taste of the way it's been at companies like SpaceX and others, for a long time, where it's just like constant change. How did you think about, like from a prioritization perspective, as an example, as a manager at SpaceX, how did you think about that with your team of when there are constantly changing priorities? Did you have to work with people who keep them from freaking out, keep them from stressing out? I don't know. How did you
Yeah.
approach that with your team?
Yeah, I would say that that's a good point. And yeah, it's being a manager, it's providing the right amount of air cover for your team. And it's yeah, especially for folks that are there's a lot of pressure on the IC sometimes in demands and figuring out something that may not necessarily exist yet. So it's giving them the air cover where they don't have to like worry about any sort of repercussions if something bad happened or if there are plenty of examples where, someone on the team made an update and to the system and it caused problems and brought the system down. And I think again, it's like giving the air cover, having their back, not throwing teammates or other folks on the team under the bus when things like that happen, because that just
Sure.
adds to the stress.
Yeah.
It's more of as a manager, I feel like sometimes it is your job to be the punching bag to external teams. And it's hard. Like a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people are afraid to do that. But that is literally your job as a manager is to support your team and be there for them. And so I think in a world of constant change, a lot of things could get broken. Your team might be at the center of an outage or something like that. But as a manager, you really have to support them.
I love that because it does recognize, it kind of brings a new responsibility. The main, I would agree with everything that you just said, that's kind of always a manager's job, is to provide
Yeah.
that top cover. But in a when there is less change, or when
Yeah.
change isn't being as demanded, maybe it's not as critical of a function. Where in any organization, if you want high change, yeah, there's going to be higher chances, higher risk. And so if you want people to perform, then a manager needs to provide that protection. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I would say to add to that, and I think on the other end, it's after, let's say, an incident like that happens, it's also the manager's job to figure out why that happened and ensure it doesn't happen again. And sure, we'll get into other topics on that through this podcast, but there's a lot of I always felt that. I felt as a manager, it's when you're managing people, but you're also managing like your portion of the company, your portion of deliverables for the mission. So there's that dual purpose. It's not just management. You're also responsible for delivering, whether it's a product, whether it's software, whether it's any sort of function to the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. The other item that you brought up about kind of management at SpaceX was about this idea of competitiveness. And I always found it interesting because when I was in the military, I was always surprised because the military, the competition between members is extremely explicit, because there are promotion boards, who's going to the promotion board. There are school boards, and you know exactly who it is. And there's so many slots. Some people get them, some people don't. And yet somehow there's not a lot of poisonous competition between people. And I think there's a few reasons for that, that are specific to the military, some of them good, some of them bad, but it's not there. I think in the corporate world, it's much less explicit, but it clearly is still there. And I think but despite that, there tends to be more of that like poisonous competition. But you said that isn't what there was. Lots of competition, but it was generally productive competition. Is that
Yeah.
was that natural to the people who were there, or did you do, was there anything that you did to try to promote that?
Yeah, I just think back, you're just surrounded by a lot of action oriented people that are there to solve problems, that love space. And I think it was more of, yeah, it's just more that the default was everybody just wanted to get stuff done as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, yeah, I never felt this way. There's everyone has their experiences, but in my experience working within the build reliability org and within the software team was always like very much around people just wanted to solve problems.
Yeah. Just fostering that focus on the outcome.
Yeah. And you don't want to be the one not solving problems. So
Yeah.
it creates that kind of aura of a
Yeah.
positive competition.
But I mean, it highlights the importance of alignment in terms of like what you're talking about and what actually drives promotion. If you're promoting people who solve problems, then you'll want people to solve problems, or then people will want to solve problems. If you're promoting people because they go to lunch with the CEO or they have a personal connection, then that's what you're gonna get. And so it's just, aligning with that.
And SpaceX in general was good about like not rewarding those behaviors.
Yeah. That makes sense. You grew as a leader at SpaceX. You then went to ABL, and at ABL you got started from zero. Like there wasn't a software team or much of one in place. I believe you just kind of built your own team from scratch. How did you start thinking about that when you went there? How'd that go?
Yeah, so there was a software team, but they were pretty stretched thin. One of my co-founders, Dave Wilson, was leading the effort before I joined. But it was a very ambitious project. Yeah, building an ERP system, MES system. ABL also built telemetry software and ground control software. So it was very ambitious, and the team was not sized correctly for that.
Yeah.
So a big part of my role when I joined was help steer primarily on the ERP MES side, help steer that to support the goals of the company.
Can you define those two terms for anybody who's not familiar with them?
Yes, sorry about that. So ERP is enterprise resource planning. So that's your system that handles all financial transactions like master records, purchase orders, all that type of stuff. MRP, which helps balance supply and demand. So you know what you need to order, what you have in stock, what's being demanded. So that's material requirements planning. And then MES is a manufacturing execution system. So that's the system that has all your work instructions that engineers write, but then technicians and folks out in the shop go through and execute. And this is the record of the work being done.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Figuring out where the gaps were. How do we introduce necessary process to make sure that we're not releasing updates that cause outages, putting together basically like a service level agreements or SLAs with the rest of the company to make sure, okay, if this problem happens or if a bug is found or an enhancement requested, what is the contract between us on when those things get fixed? Because it's like these systems, like this is what people are using every day in these companies.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It could be, and when I was on the user side of these systems, back when I was at Parker and early at SpaceX, it could be really frustrating using a system that doesn't actually help you, that creates more roadblocks than actually paves paths for you. So yes, it was great. And yeah, we basically built the team up. I think initially it was like 7. I'm trying to think, like across all of the software that I mentioned, it was 6 or 7 people, and we built it up till 17 or 18.
And what were some of the biggest challenges you had in scaling that? Was there anything that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah,
not necessarily from a technical perspective, but more from just kind of the
hiring and interviewing could be elusive sometimes. Like I like referrals, and I think some people see referrals as like nepotism or something. I see referrals as, hey, like one, it's like I have a trusted relationship with this person. Like we've worked on projects. I've spent thousands of hours doing stuff with this person. We know how to have discourse and disagreement, and like we know how to resolve that, right? I think the other thing is when you have other folks on your team referring people, it's like there's a sense of like responsibility when you refer someone. If that person does great, cheers you on and are like, wow, you brought an all-star to the
Yeah,
team. If you bring
absolutely.
someone that creates more work for people, then so that stuff is known and seen. But yeah, I mean, it's challenging. Some roles are easier to hire than others. Other ones are also difficult. Software has its challenges with hiring. There's also convincing an organization because like the average salary for a software engineer is higher than the average
Yeah,
salary for a hardware engineer.
yeah,
So it's like, how do you prove to leadership and justify that? It's even to other people like in the organization, like company overall knowing that. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges, finding the right skill sets, making sure that you set that person up for success, setting expectations, and yeah.
yeah, yeah. Hiring is such a key component. Out of curiosity, since you specifically called it out, like what is it that's more challenging about hiring software, or what is a particular challenge about hiring in software?
In hiring software, you said?
Yeah, yeah, hiring in like hiring a software
Yeah.
engineer. What's a particular challenge about that?
I think the challenge that I generally have, and it's like when I build software, I always see it through the user's eyes, like the person using the
Yeah,
software. And it's finding software engineers that share that goal, that are
yeah,
the only thing that ultimately matters is that the person using your software actually receives benefit from your software. Um, there are a lot of, and this is just every technical field. There's
yeah,
people that care about things being technically perfect. They don't want to ship something that's like half done, even if that half is the half that we need right now. So it's finding engineers. And again, this isn't just software engineering. It's
sure.
finding engineers that understand where on the pendulum you need to swing with completeness, quality. And that was a thing that I do feel SpaceX helped ingrain in anybody that worked there.
Yeah,
It's being able to make those calculations. But yeah, I'd say that's the hardest part because it's everyone gets into their field for various reasons and stuff like that. And it's some people want to optimize this one thing, but yeah, I generally liked hiring full stack software engineers because I wanted them to
yeah.
own the solution that they're building from different angles of software development.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, even from the non-technical fields. When I think about hiring at Better Everyday Studios or just hiring in general at in talent development, I'm always looking for people who at some point in their career had experience out in the business, because I need them to remember, like, we're here to support the business. Like, it does, like, we don't make learning for learning's sake. We make learning that helps the business in some way. And yeah, having somebody with that lens it can be tricky to find sometimes.
Yeah. And
Makes sense.
the unfortunate way to find who's there for those reasons are when there is a problem or an outage, it's who's there
Sure.
working on it, who's not going to bed until they figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like who stays up till 4 in the morning versus who goes to bed and just lets the problem linger.
You're
Um,
highlighting exactly why I like to stay on the learning side of the fence, because problems in learning don't require that kind of stuff
yeah.
generally.
The thing is with software, it's just like if you have an outage, it's just
Yes.
like it's
Yes. It's critical.
yeah. Especially
Yeah.
at SpaceX. You don't wanna be at the center of an outage there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, speaking then, I want to zoom out a little bit to a different kind of take on management, because since you've spent all your time as, a product manager as well, like, I do think it's really important to remember that, like, there's a lot of manager roles out there where you have a lot of stakeholders and you have explicit control over your team, but there's all these other people that you have to manage and you don't have clear control over them. You need to probably there's plenty of times, I'm betting, where there's been two parties, they want different things, and you're the one that's kind of ultimately choosing, we're building the software to support this one, not that one, and you got to figure out that relationship. So how do you navigate this? I think it's often called, it's in this case, it's probably more than informal leadership, but it's certainly not explicit leadership.
yeah, I've always been in this role of implicit leadership, whatever the term is there. When I was at Parker Hannifin, I had a role where I would be sent out to some divisions that had some struggles, whether it was on time delivery. And then I was told that I couldn't really come back home until those were resolved. And I'd be dropped into a place where I didn't really know anybody. No one had any reason to trust me, but I had to be able to accomplish this wild goal.
Yeah.
And obviously, there was a team that I was working with and whatnot, but I literally had no authority. And so the way that I always work is, and it doesn't matter where I start, it was the same thing when I went to ABL, when I was at SpaceX. I like to work on projects with people for them to understand where I'm coming from, how I see
Yeah.
the world, what my technical skill is. So it's just because I'm a manager, that doesn't mean I can't get my hands dirty and do the work. So I think it's really important for people to see that I could do the work. I think that helps a lot. But ultimately, it is trust. It's when you leave a conversation with me and you tell me about this problem that you're having, do you actually think, are you confident that I'm going to take that information and do something with that? And so building that trust is very difficult, and it was hard at SpaceX. Like that meant, hey, when I was out at the launch site and a launch engineer was complaining about a fit up issue, that I got on the phone with the design engineer, worked with them to update the drawing, release the drawing, and then cut work orders to go and rework all those parts. There's trust that gets built there that, hey, when I say that I'm going to help you, I'm actually going to help you.
Yeah.
And you have to do a lot of those things. And fortunately, I just like solving problems. So there's like there's the overlap of I really like solving problems. And apparently that helps build trust with people. And I'd say from implicit leadership, that's the most important because you have zero authority over that person.
Yeah.
Maybe you could be the most charismatic person and somehow convince people to want to follow you and listen to you.
I've
But
seen that.
yeah, it exists.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm not like, I
Yes.
wouldn't consider myself the most charismatic person, but
Yeah.
I think people know that when they work with me that I'm going to follow up. There's tight feedback loops and I'll tell them if I don't know. And if I don't, then I'll pull the right person into the picture and have them help.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Really. Yeah. And again, bring this back to kind of the learning space. Sometimes,
Yeah.
training people often feel like we're order takers. People come to us and be like, hey, I need a course. I need a course. And there's all
Yeah.
this discussion of, in fact, a friend of mine just wrote a book that's like how to stop being an order taker. And my take on it always, if you want to stop being an order taker, you have to start by being really good at taking orders. You have to be really good at solving people's problems, about listening to them, about giving them the solution, even if maybe early in a relationship, it's the wrong solution, but it's the solution they want. So you do it. And then over time, you build that relationship where you're trusted as somebody that can deliver. So then you get trusted as somebody who can talk to them and give them advice. And then that's how you build that relationship.
It's just even like understanding. And it's like some of the times that I've been frustrated at work is when it's like I would explain something and the person on the other end either doesn't understand, doesn't ask the right questions to understand, and in some cases pretends to understand, and then something completely different happens. And it's like, where was the disconnect? You know?
I'm here.
So yeah,
I'm seeing the myriad of TikToks and YouTube shorts I've seen of the quote unquote bad product manager, or the non-technical product manager that just doesn't ask the right questions, as he said.
yeah, there's a whole other
Yeah.
podcast we could have on that. But in short, it's like product management has in some software circles has gotten bad rap because it's easy to not, it's a hard role. Like you don't go to school to become a product manager. And a lot of the great product managers that I've worked with, follow, or have a lot of respect for have come from like non-traditional backgrounds. Like I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a product manager. Like,
Yeah.
you know?
That many people do.
Yeah. And yeah, there's generally a really good story behind a great product manager, but it's a hard role to do really well.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been a fantastic discussion, Yaron. I mean, from early on, we were talking about like one of the key roles of a manager just being providing that air cover. I think that's something that I see all the time. And that, but even that, it's funny because the conversation kind of went full circle. We started with this idea of providing air cover, but really what that is, it's about what we just talked about. It's about building those trusting relationships. And so I think it's just maybe whether the leadership is implicit or explicit, it just kind of changes what you're doing to build that trust. But ultimately, you're building trust. So that's all fantastic. To kind of close things out, simple question of if somebody's listening to this, like who should be reaching out to you to get more information about Magenta? What's like the ideal case, and how do they reach out to you?
Yeah. So basically, anyone that's manufacturing stuff, we like working with builders, and we want to make it very easy for people to build stuff because it's unnecessarily difficult. I think any type of company, ranging from a startup to a company that has full on production line set up. And yeah, and I think the area where Magenta actually really is starting to shine is on helping with change management, with design changes,
Nice.
understanding the differences between those variations, and setting up agents to create cross checks on various records to prevent things early in the process versus waiting till it's late. But at the end of the day, we're looking to help builders, not necessarily focused on aerospace. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. I'm sure people really get a lot out of it. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the next time we chat.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help turning your organization's great engineers into great managers, me and my team at Better Everyday Studios would love to help. We deliver targeted and interactive training workshops that are designed to help build the 3 fundamental skills of any new manager: building trust, giving feedback, and setting goals. Reach out to me through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can start making your organization better every day.